Check, check. All right, y'all. We're live with Loop Sessions, Vancouver, October 2020. Special guest.
What's up?
Mr. Stee in the building.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming out, man. This is fun.
Of course. It's good to see the setup behind the scenes.
Yeah, this is literally behind the scenes. We're set up a little further behind than we would be.
We lounging.
We're lounging. We're drinking wine. Puffing on a little bit of good. And yeah. So, recent release.
Yeah.
How was that?
That was awesome. Yeah, so basically, like I said in my Instagram post about it, once COVID hit, pretty much the entire month of April, I was just making so many beats and really just fell in love with making beats from samples. I mean, I always did some sampling, but I had got a bunch of records when I went to New York last year, and I was feeling bad that I hadn't used a lot of them. And then it was a combination of some stuff from vinyl and some stuff from just digging on YouTube. And yeah, I just like felt like I unlocked another level of using samples to make beats, and was just sending a bunch of them to Tris, and was also listening to the Knowledge Anderson .Paak album and getting really inspired. Like, what would
Knowledge do?
Yeah, exactly. But what would R&B singing sound like on like more sample chop hip hop Knowledge type beats? So kind of came up with that concept and hit her up and was like, we should do like a full project like this, and she was super down. So that's kind of how that whole project came together, and that was the first single from that, and the rest is coming in a couple of weeks.
Wicked. So that's Mr. Stee and Tris are doing a full EP together. They just released their first single on last Thursday it was.
Yeah, and then we just dropped a little video today as well.
Nice. So yeah, we'll link to that for sure. But yeah, it was a super smooth release, man, and I definitely heard you move into the sample chopping realm of hip hop production more so from your like live music production background. So
yeah, I mean, I get inspiration from both. I think I just like, if I'm getting inspired by something, I just kind of dive right in. I don't really question. I'm like, okay, I'm into sampling. Yeah, like with Lemons, when I put that out, that was like a lot of live instruments and sampling, or like sampling and seeing how I could reinterpret the chords or the soundscape with my own guitar or my other chords. So I also really love doing that too.
But this one coming up is more a purist sample.
Yeah.
Crate digging, MPC rocking.
Yes,
that's dope. So you're hanging out with Marlo a lot and the East Boulevard boys.
Exactly. Yeah, rubbing off on me for sure.
Sweet. Man, it's impressive the amount of music that you put out this year. I just counted, you had 7 releases just this year, and the year's not over.
Yeah.
One of those is a full length album.
Yeah.
So cheers to you,
Thank
my friend.
I appreciate
that's
that.
dope.
Yeah, I'm just always creating, so inevitably, if you're always creating, you're gonna always have stuff that you like and that you want to put out. So
yeah, it's one thing to just always be creating, and then it's another to get it out the door, and that's a hard thing to do, because the work between the like, oh, I had fun creating and I'm always creating, and the finishing and the throughput, that's hard to get over. So
definitely, I mean, that's one of the things that I felt has kind of taken me to what I feel is a new level in my production, just like on a personal level, just always looking at my production and wanting to be better. The way that I found that I got better was just doing projects, making music, and then actually putting it out, because I find that if I put it out and share it with people when I feel like it's as good as it can possibly be in the moment and at the level that I'm at that time, and I put it out, then I can just not think about it anymore, and I'm on to the next thing. Like, if you're always making stuff but never closing that loop, then there's all this stuff almost like kind of weighing you down of like, oh, what do I work on? But I feel like if you go through the process of starting a song, working on a song, revising a song, putting out a song, as you go through that process, you actually learn so much, and I feel like just in my personal experience, it's really helped me.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. That's really good stuff. So how do you then find, where's the line at which you decide a project is going to go all the way through? Because in how I work is like, I'm going to make 4 beats in a day and maybe one of them will be good enough to continue with? How do you decide when to push gas and put it all the way up on a Spotify?
That's also a good point, because I think if you are making a lot of beats or you're always creating it, I mean, we've all had that as producers where, you know, you're making a beat at 3 a.m. It sounds so fire, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, that's not quite how I thought. But so sometimes it's super obvious, like, okay, you know, I thought that was dope. It's actually not that dope. Sometimes, you know, there's things that I made, you know, a couple years ago, and at the time I thought weren't that great, and then you come back to it and revisit. So I think it's just always like having an open mind and just being receptive to how your taste can change. But I think for me, I also find that it helps me to kind of like think conceptually too. And so if I am working on a project, like for Lemons, for example, I knew that I was going to do that project. So if beats that I made were in that soundscape or in that field, then I knew that, okay, I want to keep working towards it. But it's never something that's like just set in stone. When I work on albums, basically I will create like a full progress sheet of how things are going and like what songs are on it and the order of the songs and the progress of those songs as they're being completed. But if you were to look at my versions of my progress reports, there's like many different versions where I take songs off or I change the order or do all this stuff. So yeah, there's not really a clean and easy answer to knowing which stuff you should work on. But if you keep coming back to it and you keep resonating with it, or if it fits within a certain soundscape that you're working with, then yeah, go for it.
Right. So you created Planet Lemons, and then if one of the beats that you created are a little person, if that guy should be living on Planet Lemons, he stays on Planet Lemons.
Yeah.
Otherwise, get out of here, man. You're going to Mars with Elon.
Exactly. And if he's chilling on Mars with Elon, that doesn't mean it's a bad beat. It just means like you can use that for something else, or you know, you can give it to an artist, or you know. But also I've had to learn to get better at letting go too, because when you're making a lot of stuff, and like you said, not everything is the best thing you've ever done, and sometimes you might even be personally attached to it because you spent a lot of time on it and you do have a certain personal connection with it. But if at the end of the day it's not working, or you just don't resonate with it anymore, then yeah, it's not a big deal to let that go.
Yeah, that's hard to do because
easier said than done.
A lot of times I find myself like I'll be grinding, especially with IMUR, like we'll grind and we're 4 iterations in on a track, and then the beat that I whipped up in 20 minutes before the band showed up, and Jenny just throws some random lyrics on it, that's better. It's a better song. So like, how do you know when to let go? It's part of the practice. It's part of being a producer and not just a beat maker, because you're deciding about creating these songs, creating these albums, producing these songs. And so yeah, I feel you. You
have to be to a degree, you have to be a curator of your own music. So it's kind of tricky,
hard to do,
because you have to be, it's so subjective, and you're also so in the weeds with it, which is why it does help. And I firmly believe that collaboration is also something that really can bring your producing to the next level, because you're just taking in input from other people, and it's kind of forcing you sometimes into uncomfortable positions where you might say like, oh, I love the beat like this, and you know, other producer or vocalist that you're working with, they have these other ideas, and it's kind of that give and take where you might have to know, okay, well, it might not be what I want to do, but also in the sake of collaboration, let's like see where this goes, and that'll also help with that whole process too. So
yeah, many minds make for better ideas, but slower movement.
That's a good way to put it, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that being said, I do love working on stuff by myself too, because there is really something about being able to be super decisive and just like, you're working on a beat and you're really just getting into flow state with it, and you don't even look at your phone or know what time it is, and you're just making decisions and just getting into that feel. And I think that's why everyone falls in love with making music in the first place, is that initial spark of creative inspiration that you get, and it just feels so electric, but then always, it's not always that easy to go from that spark to like fully finishing a song. But I think if the moment that you're inspired is the most fun moment, it's still a different kind of feeling when you get to the end. It's not quite the same feeling, but it's a different but also great feeling.
Yeah, it's closing that gap too of like when you get that moment where you're like, oh, I just heard this beat, I want to try and make something like that. That's really dope. Can you take that idea and execute on it and be happy with the result that comes of it? And that only comes with like how many hours of practice, right? And you know that through painting as well, right? When you get that vision in your mind.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it can be super frustrating when you have something in your mind that you want to articulate and then you don't hit it. It can be super frustrating because you know how you want it to sound. You've almost like already made the beat in your head or made the painting. I mean, I'm finding that because I picked up an old MPC actually, but I'm definitely a lot more of an Ableton guy.
Yeah.
So I know how to chop samples in Ableton and do it very quickly and get to my vision in my head in a relatively quick moment, so I can articulate that. And then I'm trying to use the MPC and it's like, oh my God, like it just feels really slow, and it's frustrating because you know how you could make it, but it's just like the technology or the tool that you're using, you're kind of fumbling around with that. So yeah, I think
yeah, I find the same thing with the SB404.
Yeah,
I love the machine, I love the effects, but when I go to chop stuff and I would go to make beats in it, I'm just like, I could have made 6 beats by now.
Totally, it's really challenging. I remember when you first got it, we were making beats on it, and it took us like 3 hours to make this little loop, and then we're like, oh wow,
loop's not that good.
Yeah, we're like, we don't even like this. But I mean, it's all again about the process, and I think if you're using a new tool, you have to be a little bit you got to
be easy on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Lenient with yourself, and know that like, okay, I'm learning this tool, this instrument. I'm probably not gonna make these amazing beats on it yet, but let's just explore the process and see where it goes. I mean, again, all this stuff is so much easier said than done because I still get super frustrated with it, and I've only dipped my toe in, but it is something that I want to slowly work on as well and see where it goes.
I think you touched on the real key there, and that's just like it's so cliche to say, but enjoying the process, because when I find that the more defined of an idea that I have starting out, the less likely I am to be happy with what I end up doing.
Good call, yeah.
Because even if I get very close to it, it's not, their time has gone on, and I'm not as excited about the idea as when I started. Whereas if I have a like kind of vague swirling idea of what I'm going to go into Ableton to do, and I start making something that I like, my excitement builds over time. And then so I'm more psyched about the idea that's going as it's going, and then it's sparking more ideas instead of placing that limit on myself, so
that's cool. Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. I haven't really thought of it like that, but I think you do want to set yourself up for success in a lot of ways, and just know as you do this more and more, you'll learn to like what you like and what gets you excited, so you can kind of cater your workflow. So for you know that going in with more of a loose idea gets you more excited, so it probably is better to start that way. So you figure yourself out and you figure out your process and what you like, but I do also think it's good to like throw some curveballs in, and that's why something like loop sessions is so great, because you're kind of restricted into just using those samples, or like that's your starting point, and then it kind of like caters how you're gonna approach it from there, because sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating when you just look at your DAW and it's like you could do anything. It's so endless that it's almost paralyzing sometimes too. So having something to start with, even if it's just like pulling a loop from Splice, or like having
it's like that one big question of how to start is answered for you. So you're just like, all right, I'm just gonna go. And it's good training. That's something that I've started to incorporate more in my workflow with reference tracks. And so I started to more and more heavily use reference tracks, to the point where I have a beat that I'm trying to make in the same Ableton project. and then I'm going back and forth. Did I get close? Did I get close? What do I have to do to change it? What do I have to do to get better? And I'm liking the results that I'm doing. And then the stuff that I'm making doesn't sound anything like these reference tracks, but it's giving me that.
But you wouldn't have got there without it.
I never would have gotten there. I never would have gotten there. So how do you feel about reference tracks?
Yeah, that brings up a good point, because one of the songs that you've expressed that you really like that I did, the Smoke on Lemons, that actually did start with a reference track, and I did actually pull it into Ableton, this beat that I really liked, and it's I'm forgetting the name of it now, but
that's good. Means you're not that close to it.
Yeah. I'll throw it in a DJ set from time to time. It's on God's Connect. You'll find it. Someone will find it. But it's like a ludicrous flip. But anyway, it just has like such perfect drums. And I pretty much wanted to try to make something that was emulating that drum pattern and that swing. Right. So I pulled it in, and then I was playing along to it, or at least like matching the speed. But the beat that I made is totally feels different. It might be like the same kind of feel and speed, but the thing about when you make beats or produce, like, you can't really escape your style, because your style is just choices that you make, and each individual choice that you make just adds up, and by the end of the beat, it's your beat with your style and your flavor. You can't really stop that. So I think reference tracks is a great thing, and if you're ever feeling stuck, or you're just feeling super inspired by a particular beat, try to like match the feel of it, and inevitably you'll go somewhere different, and you'll make something that's cool. So
when I was first starting out, I was under the impression that you're supposed to just do everything like off the dome, and that would be the equivalent of every single verse you do
is a freestyle. This here's a freestyle. And that'd be tough. I mean, some people can do it, but you're not always setting yourself up for success.
I think that it's kind of like just studying a master, even if you're going to go super, super close. I think that's valuable as well. Just like trying to recreate a masterful beat, like take a Dilla beat and try to recreate it every single paint stroke.
That's going to be tough, but
recreate it. That's going to be hard to do, but you trying to get there, how much are you going to learn on the way to getting there?
Yep, exactly.
You're going to learn tons, and then you're going to bring that into your own stuff when you're just like going off the cuff with an artist in a studio, and then that gets incorporated into your style. And so I like what you said, how like your decisions are your style, because it's you just choosing that particular Dilla beat to recreate is part of your style.
That's curation, right? That's like what you like. So
dope.
But you actually bring up a great point too, where like it's great to just make beats like whatever you feel that day, like carte blanche. You're just like, okay, I'm gonna pull up my session, and whatever I'm inspired by is what I'm gonna make, and kind of freestyle it. But I think it is a valuable skill to have, to try to hit a certain vibe on command, because inevitably you're going to have an artist in the room, and they're going to come in and they're going to play you a reference track, whether you like it or not, or they're going to say, I'm really inspired by this vibe, or you might even instigate that by being like, what are you inspired by lately, kind of breaking the ice artistically. But you're going to come into that situation where you're required to make a beat that hits a particular note and hits a particular style kind of on command. So if you have some practice in making beats and like going off of references, or just like trying to make beats that are a certain thing in a certain time, then it's only gonna help you. And that's not to say that every beat you do has to be like so calculated, but I think it just makes you more adaptable if like you can hit certain things when you want. Now that sometimes goes horribly wrong. Like you're like, we want to make a beat like this, and then you get pulled in these different directions, and you're kind of like, oh no, it went somewhere else. But that's cool. I mean, it's all a process. So
it's just going to make you a more well-rounded musician, a more well-rounded human being, getting to know these different genres,
Totally.
I know that I don't know what I was going to say there, but producing in a room with artists, that's something you've been doing a lot of lately.
With
Tris.
Yeah.
What's that process been like with her?
Well, I mean, the EP that we put together was kind of unique circumstance because it was like a very quarantine album where it was me making beats and then sending her beats.
Internet.
And then it was like an internet album. But we do work in the studio a lot, and we kind of put the finishing touches on that album in the studio. And Gabe was there as well, Jabril, and he mixed the whole project, and he kind of was helping us in terms of making vocal production decisions and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we worked together in the studio pretty closely, and we also did a lot of stuff with Kendra Diaz as well. And yeah, being in the studio with the artist is honestly the preferred method. Even like mixing with the artist in the room, I mean, you could send them a mix and then they're like, oh, I want this and this change. But if you're doing it as they're sitting there, they're like a lot more involved.
Mm-hmm.
And you can almost get them involved in the production process too, in a way where like,
yeah, they have ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's only gonna make the track better, but I think it also helps when you spend a lot of time with that person, or just like make beats with them there, so they're fully collaborating from the moment that the beat starts to the end of the song. They were like sitting there as you played your chords or as you started the drum loop. They're like, oh, I like it like this or like this. So I think
nice.
It's a really cool way to collaborate, and it's kind of my preferred method, honestly, because it's just so much more personal, and you just like really engage with what they're trying to do, and
right.
Everyone's bringing their own ideas to the table, because you're making the beat and then they're sitting there writing their lyrics and their melodies, and then you finish making the beat and then they are ready to like record a demo, and it's just like, it's really smooth.
And you can like check back while they're writing and be like, what do you think about this? And they're like, yeah, it's dope.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, yeah, I'm dope. Sick.
Exactly.
No, I feel you. That's a really similar process that I have with Jenny in IMUR, is like pretty much doing everything, even if it's like minutia, editing vocals, tuning vocals, comping vocals. If she's there, it's going to be better because she's so much more in touch with her artistry and the way that she wants it communicated. So it's just better to have more minds in the room, you know?
Yeah, and then you don't waste any time like trying to do something and then they don't end up liking it,
and you don't get that email where it's like, oh yeah, not really the direction, or that awful email.
Yeah, you might get it in person, which is worse, but it's honestly, it's better in the long run, because it feels more collaborative. But yeah, I mean, that being said, sometimes I like to work in all different types of ways, because you can only be that creatively invested in a handful of projects.
Yeah.
Like, it takes a lot out of you to be almost equally a producer and an artist, so to speak, in a sense, where you're like fully crafting the whole thing, and you're really collaborating with them on how the whole thing sounds and flows and feels. And sometimes it is nice to have made a batch of beats and send them to an artist, and then maybe just by the nature of location they can't be in the studio with you. It is kind of nice to like send them something, and then you're almost like surprised when they come back with this really cool idea, and you didn't necessarily have any input in it, but it was just their visceral response to your beat. And that can also be cool too. And just in the sense of also workflow and workload, you can work on more stuff if not every single thing you work on is like full executive production.
A little bit more hands off.
Yeah, which sometimes it's like less stress to do it that way.
So,
and I like that too. But
that kind of sounds like where you're drawing the line between like beat maker and producer, and that's the thing I wanted to touch on, was like,
sure,
somebody hit me up on the Loop Sessions Instagram. They're like, hey, we're looking for a producer, and I was like, okay, well, I know a lot of beat makers. Do you just need beats, or do you need a full-blown producer? And they said, well, I thought it was the same thing. And I'm like, oh no, very much not the same thing. Like, if you need somebody that can engineer your stuff, if you need somebody that can like, I feel like as soon as there's vocals involved, it's a different ball game. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that production is such or producer is such a ubiquitous word, and it means a lot of different things for different people, and it is kind of used as a shorthand to cover everything. So that's why most people, when they say producer, they're typically referring to someone that like made the beat, or that might be how they're saying it, instead of beat maker. And I mean, I don't necessarily I get the distinction, and there is a solid distinction to be made. I feel like I would almost phrase it as like they're just different types of production, because like we were talking before, where when you're making beats or when you're working on projects, like say you put out a beat tape, a coherent project, and it's all instrumentals, I would still say that you're a producer in the sense that you curated that and you had almost like an artistry in the message or the sound that you're trying to convey. But I think that there is a difference between that and then also fully working with an artist and like crafting vocals on it and really making a song out of it, essentially.
Right.
So there is some difference there, but it's not super easy to like draw the line. Yeah, and producing means different things for different people. But I think if you are making beats and you are putting out beats and you're, you know, almost like being a artist in that sense where they're under your name and stuff like that, I mean, that is producing as well. Yeah. It's just like there's almost,
you're producing a product.
Yeah, right? You're producing something.
Yeah.
So you're making something.
The producer is in the control room telling the engineer what's good, while the artists are in the live room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that like line in the sand is easier to draw, but definitely a spectrum when it comes to hip hop and electronic music, and like it almost goes into the world of A&R rep, which I've started to learn about more, where like somebody whose specific role within the project is to make sure that the music is hitting the narrative that the artist and the A&R rep have agreed about to be communicated to their demographic, to their audience. And that's like a role that I didn't know existed until the last like year and a half or so. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize how much and how many people are involved in curating a narrative for a project like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it is kind of cool that there are so many ways that you can do this. So whatever you feel like you're inspired by, or whatever where you feel like your strengths are, you can kind of lean into that and really kind of make that your brand of production or your way that you do it. And that's not to say you shouldn't always strive to like work on things that you're not good at, but I think it helps if you have people around you that can help you with these things. Like, for example, Gabe that I work with, he's a great engineer, and it is helpful if I'm working on something and I can sit there and just focus on the actual production and the vocal takes and like, oh, is that a good take, and like writing down my favorite takes and all this stuff, because I know that he's got the tracking side of it covered.
He's got it.
So yeah, I mean, you can't necessarily do everything, and it's kind of almost hard to expect that you would, but just finding people that complement you in your different areas and that you trust creatively is also so great. And I think kind of comes back to that whole collaborative aspect of things. And
dope.
Yeah.
So we just got 2 minutes until we're gonna start playing the newest music on planet Earth with Loop Sessions.
Yeah, excited
to hear you guys' beats. But yeah, before we sign off, do you have any tips for somebody that's just starting out, somebody that maybe not even somebody that's just starting out, because most of the people that are here right now, like they've dipped their feet, like their toes are wet. Yeah. So what's the tip for somebody who maybe has like been making beats for a while and is starting to get frustrated with not seeing progress anymore?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think I think everyone that is making beats in Loop Sessions, they're all kind of like, they've taken that first step beyond just like, oh, I don't even know how to make a beat, so you're kind of already at that point. To get from that point to kind of like the next level, I think the advice that I would give is kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, of just trying to finish things and trying to finish as many projects or songs or beats or whatever as you can. And in the process of putting out a song, and you don't necessarily have to put it out on like all these streaming platforms or whatever else, but just, I find that when you put it out, it just like fully completes the idea, and you learn so much in that process, rather than like, you know, starting beats or making like an 8-bar loop. The level up that I feel like you can get from that is just really, really learning arranging, because when you're making beats a lot of times, just like starting ideas or making quick beats or doing whatever, it's oftentimes a short loop. But if you work on your arrangement as well, I think it just makes better songs and better beats. So that's kind of my advice. Just finish as many songs as you can.
Take it across the end zone.
Exactly.
Good tip, man. That's a good tip, because even if it's bad, at least it's done.
And you don't ever have to think about it again. But if you don't put it out or you don't finish it, then it's gonna bug you. So
all right, word. Well, thanks for the conversation, man.
Of course. Yeah, that was
really
super
dope.
fun.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening and tuning in.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
For everybody just finishing up their beats right now, Mr. Stee has just put out the lead single off of an upcoming EP with Triss. That's spelled TRS. I think it's TRS.mp3 on Instagram.
Yes. And also put out Be Nice with Kendra Diaz as well a couple weeks before that. So it's Kendra Diaz and Jabril. So yeah, it's R&B heavy fall. Got lots more coming for you.
Beautiful harmonies on the track.
She kills it.
Yeah, I love that. All right, y'all. Welcome to Loop Sessions. Thanks for tuning in. Oh no, where did my Discord go? Okay, we're gonna roll here.